So as you've witnessed, rather, it's been a politically heated couple of days in the run-up to the Saba protests that were held this week. Tonight, we just want to explore what exactly the rule of law says in the midst of all the political noise. Is the collection of signatures an effort in futility? Those calling for Raila's arrest on what grounds? And what of police excesses? How do we truly go about police reforms? To help us decipher all this, I'm joined by Isabella Obara, who's the technical lead, litigation and legal advice at IMLU. That's the Independent Medical Legal Unit, who are dedicated to a society free of human rights abuses. So Isabella, without beating around the bush, on signature collection, what exactly does the law says in terms of removing a president? Is it an effort in futility?
Well, I won't answer if it is an effort in futility, Jesse, but thanks for having me. Obviously, IMLU is very interested in this particular discussion, especially because it stems and affects people who are violated in terms of, looking out for their rights. But I'll tell you this. The first thing, I was looking at what it is that you're sharing, but there's something that we didn't capture: incapacity. So Article 144 allows for a sitting president, to be ousted because of his incapacity. And this is how you do it in very basic terms, right? So you get an MP who can move a motion to indicate that this particular sitting president is currently incapacitated, and we are meaning this on medical grounds. And if he can have this motion and get a quarter of the House to substantiate that particular motion, then it would fall through. And what I mean is, then the Speaker will communicate this particular motion in terms of how it was moved and take it to the CJ or the Deputy CJ. The CJ's office then will analyze what it is that they have received, and in 7 days, they'll set up a committee of 5 people. This group will comprise of 3 proper medical practitioners. I mean, their qualifications are clearly set out. And then you have 1 practicing advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And then you have 1 person who's very close to the president. And obviously, if we're looking at issues of incapacitation, then what we're saying is there's a possibility that the president themselves may not be able to nominate. So anyone who's close to the president or a loved one would be there. So you have a team of 5, what we call a tribunal. That particular tribunal will then go and assess what it is that the CJ had received, right? And the trick about this particular aspect is, if indeed they find that the sitting president is incapacitated, then they will bring it back to the CJ. And you notice that that particular report, because it's obviously a medical report, if they find substance in it, then it is final. Okay. It is final. Let me finish, so then I bring you to that particular place where they then take it back to Parliament for them to ratify it. And once they ratify it, then that particular president can be ousted through that route for incapacitation. However, if they find that this person is still okay to hold office, then nothing happens after that, because then you cannot go and rule on it. So incapacity would be one of the grounds, and then maybe the other one is now the impeachment route that you've discussed briefly there. But there are some technical bits that I'd be happy to share with you as we move along. Okay, so I can definitely see the point where incapacitation is an angle when it comes to impeachment. But in terms of the route taken by the Azimio collection of signatures, those who are asking to what end, what exactly does the law say? Well, we do not have that in the law. Okay. I've given you the very first one, which is the ground being incapacitation, Article 144. And then now we go back to Article 145, where we impeach. And obviously there are 3 grounds: gross misconduct, maybe there's a crime under international or regional law, and maybe gross violation of the Constitution, a certain article of the Constitution. So through that route, then what you're saying is you'll have a member of Parliament move the motion, and it will be supported by 2/3 of the House, right? And then if indeed it is moved and supported as such, then the Speaker of the Parliament will then notify their counterpart at the Senate in 2 days. So obviously the time frames are very important, because you understand we're talking about president here. Yeah. So after that, what you have is in 7 days, then the Senate will pick up that motion, right? So once they have picked it up, they will then move it, and then if they get 2/3 to substantiate that particular motion, they will set up a committee of 11 persons, right, from the Senate. So this particular group of 11 persons will then sit down and look at for instance, let's say gross misconduct, yeah? They look at what is there. And you keep in mind that at this particular stage, JC, the president is allowed to be heard or represented.
Okay.
There's that right. Okay. I think sometimes we fumble, and maybe the thing is there's a very blurry line between politics and the law, in Kenya especially. But we can't have a slippery slope in this one, especially because then we'll be misleading the public. So at that particular point, the president can be heard and can be represented. But then you notice there's also another step. Once that particular hearing is done, then that particular team has to go back and analyze what it is that they have found. Obviously, they would find something and bring it back to Senate, or if they don't, then it stops at that point. Article 145 indicates that if they don't find anything substantive, it stops at that point. However, if they do find, which is very hard, if they do find, then the president again can be heard. Right? Okay. You are allowed to be heard, then they take it back to Parliament. You're seeing how long this is.
Yeah, it's a tedious process. It's a Herculean task, politically and legally speaking.
Yes.
So thank you for clarification in terms of those blurry lines around what can be done and what can't be done as per the law. So we'll definitely continue with this conversation. That's just a hint of what to expect a little bit later on during the broadcast. After 10 p.m., we'll definitely delve deeper into what the law says when it comes to handling unlawful
protest.
Unlawful protest,
yes,
if you can call it that way, and equally what we need to do when it comes to, limiting police excesses. What does the law say in terms of an application to bond or bail when a suspect is held? Because that's what definitely played out in the run-up to the Saba protest. We'll have that conversation with Isabella right here from IMLU. Look forward to that conversation. Allow us to take a short break, but coming up, we take a short break. When we come back, rogue contractors in Taita Taveta to be blacklisted for doing shoddy work despite receiving taxpayer funds